Hello and welcome back to my series about Horizon Forbidden West, seen from a writer's perspective. This is a game study, and in the previous two videos I did a world building study and a character study. This video is going to be about the story. A story often consists of a beginning, middle and end, and the same applies to Horizon Forbidden West. In this video I'm going to take a deep dive into the world of Horizon Forbidden West, or rather its story, and I will analyze its plot points and compare them to a well-known story structure. I will also present a list of questions that you can ask yourself about your story, and later on in this presentation I will also answer these same questions but regarding Horizon Forbidden West. Due to the nature of this video, there will be spoilers, and they're big spoilers. Several of them are major plot points, so before you continue watching this video, you should probably ask yourself if you want the spoilers or not. If you haven't played the game or are playing it at the moment, you're welcome to return to this video at a later date and then watch my presentation, so you don't get these spoilers that maybe affect your enjoyment of your first playthrough. If you have played the game but can't really remember everything that happens, you're also welcome to watch my playthrough of this game, and you can watch all the episodes I have done so far. Episodes 42 and 43 will wrap up the main quest storyline. Without further ado, let's get into it. Before we go into the summary of the story in Horizon Forbidden West, I just want to go through these questions that you can ask yourself. And these might help you when you craft your novel, whether you're writing a standard novel, a graphic novel, a screenplay, a game, or something else. The questions you can ask yourself are: who is the main character, or also called the protagonist? What makes the protagonist the right character for your story? You can think about it this way: if you start writing a story and something happens to something else and that's actually interesting, you might have chosen the wrong POV and you might switch to that other character if that's where the real story is. Who are the side characters that need to be in your story in order for your main character to go on this journey that should change them in some way? The main character, of course, but side characters can also change as a result of this journey. What is the protagonist's daily life like? So this is where you establish the status quo. Where and when does your story take place? Which event sets the story in motion? This is also the inciting incident. What is the main character's push out of their comfort zone? So this is when they leave their known life or their daily life and go on the journey. The inciting incident is what prompts them to do something, and this next question, the push out of the comfort zone, is them doing something about it. What is the middle point of your story? Is there a plot twist? Does your story have a clear beginning, middle and end? Which medium is your story best suited for? As I mentioned in the intro, it can be a graphic novel, or it can be a standard novel, or it can be a screenplay or something else. Is your story character or plot driven? Do any of your side characters have their own arc? How does the main character's arc relate to the story and its events? Which emotion or emotions do you want the reader, or in this case the player, to feel? What is the primary theme in your story? Are there several themes maybe? Why does your story matter, not only to you but others who read it as well? Will you outline your story beforehand, or will you discovery write it? If you write it beforehand, you're probably a plotter, and if you just write as you come to the events that require that you write them, you're probably this discovery writer, and this is also called a pantser. If you're a mix between the two, you might be a plantser. There might be many other questions that you can ask yourself about your story besides the one that I've listed here. You can probably think of other things that you might get a handle on before you write your story. Hopefully, the questions I've listed here can help you when you craft your story, whether that's a fiction book or maybe it needs to be fiction, but regardless of what type of story you're writing. If you have any other relevant questions that other writers can ask themselves before or during their writing process, you are welcome to put them in the comments section below this video. Okay, so now to the summary of Horizon Forbidden West. In order for me to dive deep into the analysis and answer questions about it and compare these plot points to the story structure I've chosen to compare this story to, I have to summarize the story for you. So, spoiler alert, there will be major spoilers in this section of the video. So the very game begins with two separate introduction movies, or cutscenes, or whatever you can call them, montages maybe. And the first part is narrated by Silence, who is kind of like an ally to Aloy, but also a foe. She doesn't really know where she has this man. And the second part is showing Aloy's daily life and how she's running around and climbing and riding machines in order to get this thing that she needs so she can save the world ultimately. What she's searching for is this backup of Gaia, and Gaia is an AI that is responsible for a lot of different functions and machines. And if Aloy can get control of this system by gaining a copy of Gaia, and she can boot her up and make her control of all of these things that are going wrong and going rampant, then she can hopefully save the world. Some of these things that are happening in this world are causing a blight, and this blight is a new growth that spreads and it kills plants and animal life, and that's a big threat to human life on Earth as well, because they risk running out of food. So in the first main quest, Reach for the Stars, this further shows Aloy's daily life, but it also teaches the player the basic skills. We are also introduced to a character that was in the first game as well, and that is Val. Because Val doesn't know anything about focuses and how they work, Aloy gives Val a focus and teaches him how it works, and via her teaching him, the player also gets to learn the basics. An event in this part of the game is that Val tells Aloy that he won't let her run off again. He's there to help her, and he joins her on her quest, which is recovering this backup of Gaia. A surprise, surprise! Aloy and Val do not find the backup of Gaia. After the main quest ends, there's an interlude called The Point of the Lands. Aloy discovers that Hades wasn't destroyed. It turns out that the signal comes from somewhere far west. When the others are sleeping, Aloy sneaks away. She wants to, or maybe she feels like she needs to do this on her own, and she just leaves them without saying anything again. And then to the brink, The Daunt is filled with new and dangerous machines, and the nearby village is affected by this. When Aloy approaches this area where there are these big and new dangerous machines, she sees Erend, and Erend is the character that was in the first game as well. He's fighting these machines and Aloy helps him. Erend is happy to see Aloy, but her being there distracts him, and so one of these machines attack him and he's wounded, unfortunately. Once Erend hears why she left, he forgives her and he wants to come with her and fight this new thing or figure this out. Aloy tells Erend to recover. He needs to heal, otherwise he isn't any good in a battle anyway. She's faster on her own, but she doesn't have the time to wait until he has recovered. Aloy then heads to this village and demands that the stoppage is stopped. She wants the workers to get back to work so the embassy can happen. So now that the stoppage is over, the workers can get back to work, as I said, and that also means that an attendee for the embassy can go ahead and join the meeting at the embassy. That leads us to the next main quest, which is the embassy. Surprise, surprise. Aloy arrives at Barren Light. She wants to go through to the other side so she can go out and find the signal. But the guards won't open the gates for her. The embassy needs to take place first, and then maybe she can go ahead and leave Barren Light. The Tanath, which is a new clan or a new tribe, are to attend this embassy, but the clan or this tribe is split into 3 clans. All of them have to appear at this embassy to show that they're ready and willing to talk, but only 2 of the clans show up. And so without all these 3 clans, the embassy can't happen. But Aloy tries to get her way anyway. It doesn't work. The guards there at Barren Light want to arrest Aloy, but Erend, who's also there, defends her. And so the guards finally give in and they open the gate. Erend didn't really recover, but he made it to Barren Light and he's there for her, but he still needs to recover, I think, and so Aloy and Val go on without him. They leave Barren Light and go out into no man's land, but close to Barren Light there's a border. And Aloy and Val walk up to this border and talk to Tanath marshals. These Tanath don't want to let Aloy and Val pass either, and they say that if they cross the border they will be killed. But thankfully a friendlier Tanath shows up and he makes the others listen to Aloy, and he also gives Aloy a kind of knife or something that's her rite of passage. So if there's someone who won't let her in somewhere, she can show the knife and then they should grant her access. They have rite of passage now, but they are advised to wait and then stay there until the embassy is over. The 3rd clan finally shows up. One of these marshals that shows up is Cortalo. The embassy can finally begin now that all 3 clans are there. Before the embassy can really get started, a rogue Tanath rebel shows up, and this is Regala. She's got a lot of rebels at her side and they're riding on machines. It's not surprising, maybe, but a big fight breaks out between Regala and her rebels on one side, and the attendees at this embassy, including Val and Aloy. A lot of people are killed during this battle, but thankfully Aloy, Val, and Cortalo and a few others survive this fight. The next main quest is Death's Door. The player, aka Aloy, is free to go on and explore the area toward west past Barren Light, and she can thereby resume her quest in following this strange signal. Her search leads her to a location where Silence had a workshop, and she sees that there's an indentation in the ground because Silence had this orb dragged somewhere. Aloy can follow this trail, and she follows this orb's trail to a building that's inside a mountain. She enters this building and finds the orb, and it contains Hades. Surprise, surprise. Aloy talks to this Hades AI, but she doesn't really get anywhere. She can't get any real answers. She finally makes it to a door, and this door requires her DNA to unlock. She goes inside this room and finds a kernel that contains Gaia. Finally. Aloy thinks that she's safe in this room because no one else can enter, as it requires Elizabeth's DNA or her biometrics, which Aloy also has. But then some strangers show up. These strangers also want a copy of Gaia. They have some strange, new and advanced machines with them, and they look really different than the machines in the world that Aloy knows. These strangers wear protective suits. To Aloy's surprise, they have a clone of Elizabeth with them. Thankfully, the machines and most of the Zeniths leave again after they got that kernel, but Aloy has to fight one of these strangers. She tries, or the player can try to fight this stranger, but it's really not effective because the strangers wear protective suits. There's a kind of shield or energy field around them, so whatever she throws at this enemy, it doesn't hurt him at all. With the kernel in hand, she has no other choice but to escape. And she does. She's hurt, but she's alive. And that leads us into the Dying Lands main quest. She wakes up, she's badly hurt, and she's sad and emotionally destroyed because she saw this clone of Elizabeth, and she saw these new strangers, and there's a new threat, and she doesn't really understand where these people come from, and this place she wakes up in is new to her, and she doesn't know where she is. Val shows up. They talk, but Aloy wants to leave. She's eager to go on with her quest, but Val tells her to relax and so she can heal. In the meantime, while she heals, he wants Aloy to meet a new friend of his, and that is So. I don't really know if she heals completely, but she heals somewhat, and then she, Val, and So can go and meet this chorus. They have to present their case to this chorus, and they are powerful, and they decide who does what, and they decide people's fates, I think, if someone has done something wrong. This new tribe, by the way, is called Utaru. Aloy and the others want to get inside a sacred cave because they want to find out what is happening in the area, because this cauldron that the Utaru don't know is called a cauldron. They just called it a sacred cave. But this place where the machines are made has started making more machines, or maybe not more, but they're more aggressive. And the machines are also repaired in this cauldron. But the biggest problem is that the machines that come out are more aggressive and they're more powerful. Aloy, Val, and So go before the chorus, but the chorus won't listen to Aloy. And their basic opinion is that, life and death are natural cycles of life, and so their intention is to just stand back and just let things unfold, and if they die, they die because they're going to return to the earth anyway. So they're kind of like rolling over and just giving up. But that's not the kind of person Aloy is. There's an explosion nearby where they are, And so Aloy, Val, and so use this distraction as an opportunity to go ahead and enter the cave. Aloy, So, and Val have to fight their way through this cauldron. They have to fight the machines and go through this maze-like big cauldron. At the core, they have to fight a machine. The machine is activated to fight them as a malevolent and rogue AI has taken over. Like Hades, Hephaestus is also one of Gaia's subordinate functions. And this Hephaestus tries to stop Aloy from overriding the core, but this AI thankfully doesn't succeed. Aloy endures the pain of an electric shock, and she manages to force out Hephaestus from the system. That main quest leads us into an interlude, and that is the Eye of the Earth. Aloy enters a big hologram room, and she puts the kernel containing Gaia inside a console. Aloy restores Gaia and she appears. They then talk, and Aloy finds out who these strangers are and where they come from. It turns out that they are from space, and their descendants are returning to Earth from somewhere far, far away. Gaia also informs Aloy that she needs to merge with other subordinate functions, otherwise she won't be strong enough to absorb Hephaestus. If they try this merge before she's strong enough, Hephaestus will absorb her and not the other way around. The other subordinate functions are unfortunately restricted to each of their own specific places, whereas Hephaestus isn't under this restriction. It's kind of like on the Internet of Things. It can go between places, and so it will be hard to contain. In order to get these subordinate functions, Aloy has to go out 3 different places and find them physically and bring them back to Gaia so they can be merged with her. After Aloy is done talking with Gaia about all these things, she has 3 new quests, and each quest is for each subordinate function. And the game lets it be up to the player which order these new main quests are to be done in, but I chose to do them in the order that the game presented them to me, because they had different difficulty levels, and so I took the one with the lowest level first, and that unlocked a new main quest. And then when that was done, there was another main quest that was dependent on getting the first subordinate function. The first of these main quests is the one I did. I chose to do that first, but I could have done in either of the other 2, but I did that, and then the other main quests had to be done as well, and that gave her Aloy the first subordinate function. But getting the first subordinate function triggered a cutscene, and then another cutscene. It triggered a new event that Aloy had to go out and check, and so she had to do that as well, and then she could go back to getting the 2 other subordinate functions in the order that the player chooses, but I chose, as I said, to take them with the lowest level first. That leads me to the Broken Sky. The main quest, the Broken Sky, is about Aloy going to the location of one of these subordinate functions. But this location is in Tenakth territory, so first she has to become friends with them in a way, and she needs to make a deal with Chief Hecaro in order to let her get access to this room, because it's somewhere deep in the building below the throne room, and she can't get access to that until Chief Hecaro gets what he wants. And Chief Hecaro promises Aloy that he will honor her wishes, or he will honor their deal if she does what he wants her to. Chief Hikaru wants Aloy to fight alongside his men, but he also wants her to convince the Sky Clan to join in the Kulrut, which is a fight between men and machines, and this is how Chief Hikaru will find new marshals. And so Aloy and Kotaro go to the Sky Clan's territory to try and convince them to send participants for the Kulrut, but the leader there, Tekote, declines. She finds a way to destroy the bulwark, and that pressures this Tekote, the leader of the Sky Clan, to comply and send men. Kotaro goes back to inform his chief about this new event, and then Aloy can go on with her business. Before I talked about this main quest, it was the first of these quests for getting the subordinate functions, but that main quest unlocked a new main quest, and that is the Kulrut. So Aloy can't get to this subordinate function yet unless she continues helping Chief Hikaru. Chief Hikaru needs Aloy's help because they need to defend the Kulrut. Regala and her rebels are still a threat, and it's good for Chief Hikaru to have Aloy there as well. As expected and feared, Regala and her rebels and their machines show up and they attack the Kulrut. But Aloy and the others fight them and defend the Kulrut. The arena where the Kulrut takes place is damaged, however, but they come out of this fight victorious. I think a few Tenakth die in the process, but sadly, Regala isn't one of them. She escapes. Thankfully, though, now that this fight is over and Regala has retreated again, the threat is over for now, and Hikaru honors the deal he made with Aloy, and Aloy can finally get access to the room below the throne room, and so she gets this first subordinate function. And as I said previously, I did the main quest, the Broken Sky, which unlocked the Kulrut, and getting that first subordinate function unlocked a new main quest, and that is the Cradle of Echoes. Gaia tells Aloy that she has received a distress signal, because the signal came via a channel or some other form of communication that is reserved for Eleuthia, which is one of Gaia's subordinate functions. Gaia wants Aloy to go and check it out. And so Aloy, Val, and Eren go out to check it out. Eleuthia is a subordinate function that's responsible for the creation of new life. And this near or close to this cradle facility, there's a fight going on. And people from a tribe called Oseram, which we met in the first game, and some Tenakth are fighting a stranger, one of these strangers with the protective suits on. But they have a special device, and this device can deactivate the protective shield, and so this new strange enemy is killed. Aloy and Val go down into the building while Eren stays outside keeping guard. Aloy and Val find a room full of ectogenic chambers. I think that's how you say it. One of these ectogenic chambers contains a clone of Elizabeth Sobeck. And Horizon Zero Dawn, the first game, was primarily about this Elizabeth Sobeck's vision and what she created. And Aloy had to figure all that out in the first game. The clone is called Beta, and Aloy and Val help her and protect her against machines that come to get her, I think, but they beat these machines and they can retreat. Beta wants to get away from the Farsenes, and Aloy wants Beta's help with restoring Gaia, so it's quid pro quo, I guess. When they are back at the base again, Aloy talks to Beta. This is the first or one of the big plot points, I think. This is where Aloy finds out that the strangers who have come to Earth aren't the descendants of the people who left Earth, but the very people themselves. Whoa, that happened 1,000 years ago, so these people have found a way to basically be immortal, or at least live for a very, very long time. This is a shock to Aloy, of course, but it's also a shock to the player. It certainly came as a surprise to me. I didn't think it would be possible, or in a fictional world, everything is possible, of course. But even though it's a shock to her, she keeps her cool, and she manages to calm Beta down. Aloy couldn't get any information about this weapon that could destroy the protective shield, but she took a fragment of the weapon or the device and brought it back to Gaia, and Gaia tries to scan it too and get information about it, but she can't really get anything out of it either. But something makes them believe that it's Silence who has created this kind of device. And the Zeniths are trying to make their own powerful version of Gaia, and they have gathered a few of the other subordinate functions. I'm not quite sure how many they have, but this adds a ticking clock to the plot, because before, or actually there was a ticking clock before, because they needed to get these subordinate functions to restore Gaia so she can reverse the effects before it's too late. But now there's extra pressure on her to get it done quickly, because they risk the far Zeniths getting a powerful version of Gaia first. Gaia reassures Aloy that it won't change their plan. It's like I said, it has added another kind of pressure on them, but their goal is still the same as before. They still need to get the two other subordinate functions. So the Sea of Sands is the subordinate function main quest. That's the second highest level out of the 3, so I did that after the other things. In this main quest, Aloy needs to get the second or another subordinate function for Gaia. This subordinate function is located in a place where Las Vegas was. Aloy meets 3 men at this location, and she becomes friends with them, especially one of them, and they help each other, and they make a device so that Aloy can get the ability to dive deep down into water without having to come up for air. And that makes her able to go down in this water-filled building below the ground, where she can get this subordinate function. And once again, Aloy needs to return to the base to merge this subordinate function with Gaia. And then the subordinate function I got as the third one is in the main quest, Seeds of the Past. Aloy still needs a subordinate function to make Gaia strong enough to absorb Hephaestus, and so she needs to travel northwest. On her way to this location, or actually when she arrives at the location, it's called a greenhouse, I think. When she gets to this location, she has a run-in with attackers, and they call her a barbarian to these new strangers. She's a stranger because she isn't like them. Aloy shoots back, of course. She tries to reach out and to make a deal with them, and so she's not there to fight. She just needs to get something, but they are there to protect the information that's in that location, and so they fight her, and she defends her own life, of course. But during the fight, she's face to face with one of these strangers who stands out because she isn't wearing the same clothes. As far as I remember, she isn't like the others, and she wears a focus too. This new stranger points out to her friends that Aloy isn't a barbarian. she can't be a barbarian when she wears a focus. And the focuses are very precious to this new tribe. Only a few of the people in that tribe wear focuses, and so they stand down and they respect this their comrades' statement that this red-haired fighter or hunter isn't their enemy. The stranger convinces the others that Aloy is one of their so-called or revered old ones. Alva and Aloy meet up at this subordinate functions location, and they work together. By working together, they are able to obtain the subordinate function. During this quest, they also find out what happened at this test station, and it's basically where Ted Faro and his evil empire could test a system that could convert biomass into fuel for their machines. Even though Alva and Aloy are very different and they have different opinions about what they should use the information for, they have the same goal, and that is to find a way to stop this crazy weather from destroying their daily lives and their ability to survive in the long term. All of these phenomena are caused by a malfunctioning AI system, and as I said earlier, it has run amok, it's gotten rogue, and it isn't really performing the functions that it should be. And so if Gaia can be fully restored and absorb the other subordinate functions, she can gain control of the machines, and machines are in part responsible for the weather and the food shortage and other things. Once again, Aloy has to return to the base and merge this third subordinate function with Gaia. That leads us to the next main quest, which is Faro's tomb. All three subordinate functions have now been merged with Gaia, but Hephaestus is still strong and is still a threat. They also find out that Hephaestus has grown so large and powerful that it can't be contained or stored in a single kernel, or transmitted or broadcast to Gaia in another way. Aloy has to go out and find a place where she can trick Hephaestus into entering a core and then trap it there. The place where they do this, where they're going to trap Hephaestus, is the Gemini Cauldron. And their plan is to install Gaia on one of the kernels in the Cauldron core and then get Hephaestus into the other so they can be merged. But in order to do this, Aloy needs to get an Omega clearance. This Omega clearance is located in Ted Faro's private bunker called Thebes. Before Aloy can get to this base, she needs to cross the ocean. She takes a boat and arrives at a settlement where the Quen tribe live, and Alva is one of these new people, and she's a Quen as well. Aloy meets CEO and other important Quen, and during this quest there are a few cutscenes, and basically it's about Alva coming along on Aloy's quest to get this Omega clearance. When they're in this bunker, Aloy and the other Quen fight machines, and when that fight is done, she can finally get the Omega clearance. That leads us to the Gemini main quest. The thing is that the merge between Gaia and Hephaestus will take several hours, and this is if Aloy does it alone, but if Beta helps, it will take significantly less time. And this is desirable because the shorter time it takes, the lesser the risk that these far-seers will discover what's going on and try and stop them. Beta is reluctant, but she finally agrees to help. Why she is reluctant is covered in a bit more detail in my video about characters from Horizon Forbidden West. I will link to that video at the end of this one. Aloy and her friends head out and they split up. They have to go to different cauldrons. The others have to go out and emit signals that will mask the true location of what Aloy is doing, with the help from Beta, of course. Aloy, Val, and Beta enter Quantum Gemini. Once again, this malevolent AI, Hephaestus, is trying to stop Aloy from doing what she needs to do. But Aloy succeeds, thankfully. She makes it to the core, and they can trap Hephaestus, and then it can be merged with Gaia. And then there's a cutscene is at the end of this main quest. The Xenis show up. These fast Xenis attack Aloy and Val. They capture Beta, and Val is killed. Aloy is badly hurt and is knocked out. This leads us into an interlude, which is also tracked as a main quest in the game guide, but that is all that remains. Aloy wakes up in a room without windows, so there isn't really anywhere she can escape to. She doesn't know where she is, but mainly she's sad because Val is dead, Beta has been captured, and Gaia has been captured as well. So this is the moment where all is lost. Aloy is very down and sad, but despite that she gets to her feet and goes through this room, but that's only when a stranger talks to her through her focus. The person who spoke to her via her focus is Tilda, and Tilda is one of these fast Xenis. This Tilda person tells Aloy that even though the other Xenis took Beta, Beta isn't in any danger. They need her and they don't want to kill or harm her. The fast Xenis have retreated to their base on Earth, and Tilda managed to escape the others and go there to her mansion, which is also located on Earth, thankfully, so Aloy isn't trapped in space. Tilda assures Aloy that they are on the same side. They both want to stop the Xenis from destroying the Earth and instead using a system to reshape the Earth in a form that Elizabeth would have liked. Aloy reminds Tilda of Elizabeth because she's a clone of her, of course, but she also sees other similarities between them, and they have certain character traits in common. Because Tilda feels like she let Elizabeth so back down, she wants to help Aloy get Beta and Gaia back. Aloy wants Tilda's plan to help infiltrate the Xenis base, but first she needs to stop Regala. She also plans to force Silence to cooperate with her and her plan. He will probably switch over to her side instead of his own if she ruins his plan of making Regala and the rebels fight for him. Silence basically wants the Tanakh rebels to attack the base so he can get access to one of the subordinate functions or one of the systems that is located on the fast Xenis spaceship. So that interlude ends, and then we're going into the Wings of the Ten. In this main quest, Aloy heads back to the base. When she arrives, the others are talking and arguing about what to do. Some of them want to fight and some of them just want to give up. One thing they all agree on is that they're sad that Val is dead. And if they don't do anything about this new threat, then everyone and everything on Earth will die, and so it will all be for nothing. So they have no choice but to stand up and fight. This quest is called the Wings of the Ten because Aloy gets the ability to fly. But Aloy needs to go and get a sunwing, and she flies out to find a powerful energy cell. The rebels are going to attack, and so Aloy has to stop this. And she takes this energy cell with her. Thanks to the machine, it can kind of hold on to it. And then she flies over to where the rebels are going to fight the others. And then she drops this energy cell. And it works kind of like an EMP, I think, because it knocks out all the machines and they drop to the ground useless. And so Regala doesn't really stand a chance against the others because without the machine she's greatly outnumbered. She lands or jumps off this machine and then lands and faces Regala. Regala is quite powerless instead of powerful now, and Regala doesn't give up that easily. And so she and Aloy is going to fight one against one. During this process of getting the ability to fly on a machine, Aloy has gained the others' respect because they say, "Oh, she's flying on the wings of the 10," and that's that's great. And all of these Tenakth have based their entire society around 10 soldiers who lived around our time, I think, who flew airplanes, these fighter jets or something, I think. And so she has their respect, but Regala doesn't care about that. She just wants to fight. And so there's a big fight that the player has to maneuver through and help Aloy, and thankfully they defeat, or Aloy defeats Regala. And now, because Aloy won this fight, the other rebels don't really do anything, and then the rebellion is over. That leads us into the Singularity main quest. Aloy and the others then head out to find the Zenith space, and they can find this space because of Tilda's help, because she knows where it is and how to access it. They fight machines on the way, but then a signal is emitted that makes new machines that attack and fight the Spectres, thankfully. And these Spectre machines are actually there to protect this far Zenith space. Aloy makes it to this tower at the far Zenith space and goes up with the elevator. Now she comes face to face with the man from before who attacked her, where she got the kernel with Gaia. She realizes that she has to fight him again. This far Zenith is called Eric, but this time he isn't that powerful because the protective shield around him has been disabled, and so she can win over him. And Aloy then goes farther up in the tower. She wants to get Gaia back and she wants to free Beta. But when Aloy gets to the top, she meets Tilda. They talk, and here's a plot twist. Tilda wanted to save and help Aloy because she's a clone of Elizabeth Sobek. Tilda regrets breaking off contact with Elizabeth when they were still on Earth, and she also regrets leaving her. In order to try and make up for this, that she did to or didn't do to Elizabeth, she wants Aloy to come along with her into space, but Aloy refuses. Tilda tells Aloy that she needs her to come with her, but Aloy still refuses. Tilda then changes into some kind of Spectre suit, some kind of machine or mechanized protective suit, and she starts fighting Aloy. After a tough final boss battle, Aloy wins. It took me a lot of tries to get this done, but Tilda is defeated and the threat is finally over, for now. During Aloy's talk with Tilda, Aloy found out that Tilda and the other Zeniths didn't actually come to Earth to start over by wiping everything and everyone out, but only to use that as a way station. They were actually fleeing from a greater threat that's following them across space. This new threat is called Nemesis, but after this fight scene ends, there's a cutscene. The others join Aloy on top of this far Zenith base building, and even Silence shows up. Aloy then, after the others go their separate ways, she reflects on what has happened, and she prepares mentally for what's to come. The others are also relieved that it's over, for now at least, but they know that there's a new threat looming in the distance. Aloy says that she's been alone for so long, and that she has still felt alone, even if she wasn't. But that has changed now. She finally doesn't feel alone anymore, and that ties in with the main theme of this story, I think. But I'll touch upon that later. The story structure that I think matches this story really well is the hero's journey. As with other story structures, the hero's journey is also divided into 3 acts. I use the 27 chapter method, but that has several plot points in common with the hero's journey. Act 1 of the hero's journey is ordinary world, call to adventure, refusal of the call, meeting with the mentor, and crossing the threshold. Alternatively, this plot point could also be the first plot point in Act 2. That was the departure part of the story. And initiation is Act 2. That's tests, allies and enemies, approach to the inmost cave, the ordeal, and reward, also known as seizing the sword. The third act is return. It's the road back, resurrection, and return with the elixir. Now I'm going to go through how I think the story structure of Horizon Forbidden West matches the hero's journey. In the first plot point, it's the ordinary world, and this is the very beginning of the game. There's an intro movie of Aloy running around trying to get a backup of Gaia. Val joins her, and together they try to find a backup of Gaia. Then call to adventure. The call to adventure could also be called the inciting incident. I think that this plot point is when Aloy discovers that there's a signal that's being sent from somewhere out west. The world is in a dire state, and if she doesn't try and stop it, everyone and everything will be wiped out. Refusal of the call. This plot point isn't directly represented in Horizon Forbidden West. I don't think so, but maybe it is. But because of who Aloy is and how driven she is to try and fix things, she doesn't resist the call to adventure. However, she does resist letting other people in. She's a loner, and she's quite determined to try and save the Earth on her own. So she basically ignores what Val said to her in the beginning of the game, that he won't let her run off again, but she does that anyway. And so because this refusal of the call is when she says, okay, or before she kind of accepts that Val doesn't want her to go off, to go on alone, she switches, she flips 180 degrees and then sneaks away from the others. And this happens in a cutscene after the interlude, or rather the interlude / main quest 2, which is the point of the lance. And meeting with the mentor. I think that Aloy has several mentor figures, at least 2, maybe 3. She's got Elizabeth, who lived long ago, but Aloy can't communicate with her, but only learn more about her and who she was as a person via data points and other things she discovers in the world. Silence is both a mentor and ally, and an enemy to Aloy. He switches according to how it suits his own motives best, but thanks to him prodding Aloy, he pushes her to do better, and she learns that he can't be trusted. Aloy doesn't meet up with this mentor face to face, as Silence only appears to her as a hologram. At least he did in the first part of the game. It's also safer for him that way, because she might hurt him if he was actually there. If Aloy has 3 mentors, I think it's Erend, maybe? Erend could also be considered a mentor. He's certainly an ally and a friend. Aloy meets Erend in the main quest To the Brink. Crossing the threshold. This plot point can also be called New World. And this plot point has to be when Aloy can finally leave Barren Light behind and go into No Man's Land, and then farther into Tenakth territory. Tests, allies and enemies. This plot point could also be called Trials. This point is very broad, and I therefore believe that it includes several plot points in Horizon Forbidden West. It probably spans over the main quests, the Broken Sky and the Cool Road, as well as the Sea of Sands and the Seeds of the Past. Regarding tests, Aloy has to recover the 3 subordinate functions, and those tasks present their own sets of problems. And allies. During the main quests, Aloy meets new people, and that includes Kotalo, Alva, Zoe, and Beta. And she's also joined by Eren and Val, who were already on her side, and we met those in Horizon Zero Dawn. Enemies. Aloy's enemies are rebels, who stand in her way when she tries to get the subordinate functions, as well as machine enemies who are out to kill her if they can. Aloy's biggest enemy is Regala, but Regala is also an enemy to the rest of the Tenakth. A typical element of this plot point is that the hero or heroine doubts their own abilities and whether they are able to pull it off or not. At some point, Aloy asks Gaia if Gaia really thinks Aloy can do this, that she can pull it off and save the entire world. And Gaia, being a highly sophisticated AI, tells Aloy that yes, she believes that Aloy can do it. But I think that Gaia ought to know that Aloy's chances of actually succeeding are slim. But because Gaia's primary purpose is to preserve human life on Earth, it's in her interest to achieve her goal, and she needs Aloy for that. Thanks to Elizabeth's training of Gaia, Gaia has evolved feelings, and she's not just a cold AI that does things because it's cold and careless about human life. So it has feelings, and so I think that Gaia wouldn't hesitate to lie to Aloy if it helps them reach their common goal. Approach to the inmost cave. I think that this plot point is when Aloy has to enter Thebes, which was or is Ted Pharaoh's private bunker. And that was the main quest, Pharaoh's tomb. Aloy needs Omega clearance in order to trap Hephaestus. The plot point about the inmost cave doesn't have to be a literal cave though, and it most often isn't a literal cave. But Thebes can definitely be likened to a cave because it's underground, it's probably dark and damp and falling apart. The important thing to keep in mind regarding this plot point, however, is that the protagonist isn't entering the figurative cave yet, but is only preparing to enter the most dangerous place. In order to defeat the villain, which are the Farsinas, Aloy needs to get the Omega clearance so she can trap Hephaestus in the core in the Gemini cauldron. The ordeal. I think this is what happens in the Gemini main quest. Aloy, Val, and Beta have to go into the Gemini cauldron to merge Gaia with Hephaestus. Aloy needed to fight a lot of machines before reaching the cauldron core, and when she finally gets there, the Farsinas show up. They kill Val and capture Beta and Gaia. A typical event that happens during this plot point, the ordeal, is that someone close to the protagonist dies, and sadly that had to be Val. There might be an extra plot point here. I think that the interlude All That Remains is also about the main character being knocked out emotionally. Aloy is hurt, and she mourns Val's death and Gaia's and Beta's abduction. I would call this the story's or the protagonist's darkest point, or All Is Lost. Or maybe the interlude / main quest All That Remains belongs under the next plot point in the hero's journey. Reward, seizing the sword. It's also called that. I'm a bit unsure, but I would say that this plot point in the hero's journey matches with the interlude or main quest All That Remains. Aloy and Tilda talk, and Aloy finds a new ally, or at least potential new ally, in the form of Tilda. Aloy knows that the threat isn't over, but Aloy doesn't want to give up. If she can team up with both Tilda and Silence and the rest of her allies, they have a chance at beating the Zeniths. But first they have to stop Regalla. And that leads us into the next main quest. The Road Back. This must be the main quest, the Wings of the Ten. Aloy returns to the base and joins up with Cortalo, Zoe, Alva and Erend. She convinces them that they have to fight against the Zeniths, and she tells them about her plan. They are joined by Silence and Tilda. Aloy needs to get a flying machine called a Sunwing so she can go out west and fly out west. She needs to override a tall neck also to reveal data about the landscape, and then she also needs to find a Horus energy cell that she can drop on Regalla's rebellion. Aloy does this and is successful. Regalla's machines drop and they're now useless. Aloy then fights Regalla to put a stop to this threat for good. Regalla has a personal vendetta against Aloy because she stopped Regalla's attack at the embassy. Resurrection. This is the story's climax. Clearly, this is the main quest, Singularity. During this main quest, Aloy fights Eric, whom she went up against before, but this time she can defeat him because his shield has been deactivated by Silence's special device. However, the fighting doesn't stop there. Tilda reveals information about her and the other Zeniths and what they really came for. Aloy learns that there's a new threat, a bigger and more scary threat. Aloy defeats Tilda. And then the final plot point, return with the elixir. This plot point could also be called the resolution, and this unfolds in the form of a cutscene at the end after the big fight. Aloy knows that the threat isn't really over. She has learned that this new threat is called Nemesis, is on its way to Earth. Aloy is joined by the others and she tells them about this turn of events. They leave separately to go back to their own respective tribes and tell them the news so that they can prepare for this looming threat. I believe that Aloy has changed as a result of this journey. She believes even more in her own abilities, but she also realized that she couldn't have done all of this on her own. She no longer feels alone either. In order for you to get an overview of how this looks and how the main quests line up with the plot points of the hero's journey, you can look at this or these two tables. I have split it in two because it's too long to be in one table. But as you can see, the first two main quests set up the story and introduce the player to the game's mechanics. It's also in these first quests that we get insight into how Aloy thinks and acts. She wants to do things alone. Her refusal of the call is when she 1. Tells Erend to stay and heal. She doesn't have time to wait for him to recover. And 2. When Val says that he won't let her run off again. She seems to accept that, but later on she sneaks away. The main part of the game is all of these trials in the middle, where she encounters enemies on one hand, but finds new allies on the other hand, and she also joins old allies. And the ending of the game wraps up the story neatly. As you can see, the story mainly follows the hero's journey quite well. So now I'm going to answer the questions from before. It's interesting to look at story structures, and I could talk more about it and how the plot points in Horizon Forbidden West align with plot points in other story structures, but instead I want to circle back to the beginning of this presentation. I'm now going to answer the questions that I posed to you earlier regarding Horizon Forbidden West. Who is the protagonist? It's Aloy. She was born an outcast and she doesn't know where she belongs. And what makes her the right choice for this story? Well, it has to be Aloy, who tries to save the entire world, as it's only her who can get access to these old important buildings. Being a clone of Elizabeth Sobeck, who was the mastermind behind the Zero Dawn project. And who are side characters that need to be in the story in order to help Aloy? Well, that's Erend, Val, Zoe, Alva, Cortalo, Beta, and then also later on, Silence and Tilda. Aloy needs help from Erend, Cortalo, and Val for their combat power, as they are fighters or warriors or something like that. They can fight. And Aloy needs Zoe for her knowledge about the machines and her quick ability to learn how to use the focus. And she needs Beta for her special abilities, as she's also a clone of Elizabeth Sobek. And Aloy needs Silence for the special device that can deactivate the Farsine's shield. And she needs Tilda for her insight and knowledge about the Zenith base. What is the protagonist's daily life like? Well, Aloy never relaxes. The threat in the first game didn't really end, it wasn't resolved, and so she's still trying to fix the problem when the game begins. Where and when does the story take place? Well, that's on Earth, but in the future. About 1,000 years from now, and it's an apocalyptic society. Which event sets the entire story in motion? Well, this is also called the inciting incident, and that is when Aloy discovers the signal that comes from the west, and she needs to go and check that out. What is the main character's push out of the comfort zone? Aloy doesn't know where she belongs, but yet I think she's finally gotten accustomed to living in her known surroundings east of Barren Light. But in order to go and check out the signal, she needs to go into unknown and dangerous territory that lies past Barren Light, toward the west. What is the middle part of the story, and is there a plot twist? I think the midpoint of the story could be when Aloy has gotten the first subordinate function. After she merges this subordinate function with Gaia, she is asked to go and check out its signal. This is what leads to the fact that Aloy sees this fight between one of the Zeniths and some Oseram and Tenakth rebels. She witnesses how the Zenith's protective shield is disabled, and Aloy then realizes that if she can somehow figure out how this weapon works, she can fight the Zeniths. And this midpoint happens at the end of the main quest, the Kulrud. Maybe the discovery of a potential way to disable the Farsine's shields isn't a plot twist per se, but rather a necessary means to an end. However, another but bigger midpoint is when Aloy meets the new clone of Elizabeth during the main quest, Cradle of Echoes. And there is indeed a plot twist. I didn't expect another clone of Elizabeth. Does the story have a clear beginning, middle, and end? Yes, I believe so. The beginning part of the game or the story encompasses the intro movies and or montages, and the training session, as well as the first few main quests before Aloy leaves known territory. The middle of the story is the single plot point, tests allies and enemies, and that spans over a lot of the middle main quests. The end of the story is at least the last few main quests. I would say that the middle part changes into the end at or after the interlude / main quest, all that remains. These groups of main quests and this distinction between beginning, middle, and end matches quite well with the 3 acts of the hero's journey. Which medium is the story best suited for? The game developers obviously chose a video game to tell this story, but it could also easily work as a novel, a movie, or a graphic novel. Just a few examples. The main quests are well balanced between action-packed and slower parts where the player can relax and reflect. Furthermore, each main quest is also a combination of active input from the player, when Aloy needs to do things like figure things out and fight machines, and then cutscenes that can also be either action-packed or slower paced or emotional. And an addition to this is that I actually think that if this had been a novel, each of these main quests could have been in their own separate chapter. Is the story character or plot driven? Oh, this question is probably the one that's hardest to answer. The plot is very important to the story, of course, but the story is also very character driven. Without Aloy, there would be no story, and without a main character who's ready and willing to fight to save the world, there would be no story either. So the story needed a character with a uniqueness that sets her apart and makes her able to do all of these things, as she's a clone of Elizabeth Sobeck. But she also needs to have the right character traits, and that is some of these things that Aloy and Elizabeth have in common. They're both very hardworking and they want to help others, and they're both quite introvert and keep to themselves. And as I discuss in the character study video, I talk about these differences between Beta and Aloy, and thereby also their likeness to Elizabeth. Do any of the side characters have their own arc? Yes, they do. Several of the side characters have interesting and fulfilling arcs. For example, Kotaro learns that he still has worth even though he lost an arm, and Alva learns the truth about the ancestors, these old ones or whatever they call the people who lived way back when. Alva and the other Quen put these ancestors on pedestals, and so it's a big change and a big shock to Alva to realize that these ancestors weren't flawless and worthy of her admiration. They were flawed and imperfect, and especially one of them was the opposite of what Alva thought. How does the main character's arc tie in with the story and its events? Aloy's arc matches the story and its events really well, if you ask me. As it was established earlier, she's the one who needs to try and save the world. No one else can do so. That's only true until we all meet Beta, of course. During the course of the story, Aloy uncovers the truth about the signal, and she also learns what Silence is up to and what the Zeniths want. At least she thought she knew the whole truth about the Zeniths, but the big reveal at the end leads up to a continuation of the story. Aloy starts out as a lone wolf, just as she was for most of the first game, but along the way in Horizon Forbidden West, she lets down her guard a little more and trusts her friends and allies. She realizes that she doesn't need to do everything on her own, and she actually says outright that she doesn't feel alone anymore. I think that this might also have lessened the burden on her shoulders, because she was used to being the only one who could do something about the fate of the world. But now that she's found a sister in the form of Beta, it might have occurred to her that she's no longer unique, but that it's okay. It's better to not be unique and have friends and allies you can trust than having the fate of the world rest on your shoulders because you are unique. I think this is something Aloy realizes as well. Which emotion or emotions does the storyteller want to evoke in the reader or player in this case? Well, personally, during the game I felt several emotions, and I experienced feelings like sadness, happiness, surprise, shock and fear. But at the end, the main feeling I felt was hope. Even though there's a new and bigger threat looming in the distance, there's still a feeling of hope. The player's emotions reflect Aloy's and the other characters' emotions, I think, and Aloy reflects on this. The new threat might be big, but for now it's a happy ending. They have time to prepare for this new threat, this nemesis, and as long as people on Earth work together, they have a chance at saving the world. What is the primary theme in the story? Are there several themes? I think the primary theme in this story is found family. But other themes could be learning to trust others and accept help. No one can save the world on their own. Why does this story matter to not only the person who wrote it or created it, but also to others? Well, the story of Horizon Forbidden West matters because there's hope even though everything looks hopeless. You might experience hardships in real life, but if you reach out and ask for help, you will get through it. And as long as you try to solve your problems, there's still hope. Did the writer outline the story beforehand, or was the story discovery written? I'm pretty sure that the person who created this story plotted it in advance. I think that goes for both of the games. Both stories were carefully outlined, plotted or planned or whatever you might call it, and there's also a well-crafted design to the entire game that ties the main story together with side quests, characters, world, etc. Before I end, I would like to give you some general pieces of advice regarding stories and story structure. The great thing about the hero's journey is that using a frame like this can function as a guideline for you, regardless of whether you are a planner, pantser, or a planter. In other words, the story structure can work for you whether you plot your story or discover rewrite it. A story structure can also be used as reference when you revise stories that you've discovered written to make sure that there's a logical and complete flow to the story. Why story structures like the hero's journey work? Well, story structures work because they weren't invented to create stories on the basis of, but rather were formulated into words and put into systems by analyzing other stories and seeing trends and specific plot points in them. That's why most, if not all, stories at least have a brief insight into the main character's everyday life, establishing the status quo, an inciting incident. This is what disrupts the status quo, and then going out of one's comfort zone, the new world plot point, and then there are some trials along the way, a battle, climax, and then resolution at the end. Story structures exist because that's the way stories are best told, in my opinion. There needs to be a core theme or main takeaway from it, and there also needs to be some sort of logic and natural progression in the story. There are other story structures you can use. The hero's journey is just one of the story structures out there, but you can also use structures like Save the Cat, the 27 chapter method, which I use or tend to use, the 3x story structure, and the 7-point story structure. One thing that's worth mentioning here is that the levels of intensity varies from structure to structure, but in general, they have one thing in common, and that is that the intensity increases toward, or at least the middle, and then decreases toward the end. So you have story structures that can go up and then down, or you can have one that goes up and then a bit down and more up and a bit down and more up a bit down, or things like that. So these roller coasters can look different. Stories are often built up around cause and effect. In order to string your story together, you can end a chapter with some kind of question that makes the reader wonder. Something that doesn't fully end the chapter but naturally leads into the new one or the next one. You can do a time skip, for example, after ending a chapter on a wrapped up or semi-wrapped up note, but then you can increase the stakes in the start of the next chapter to keep the momentum going. Some writers tend to do these small cliffhangers at the end of each chapter to keep the reader engaged and flipping the pages, but maybe it's not that necessary to write a novel like that, as long as there are still unanswered questions and unresolved tension. If you're writing a web serial, however, it might be a good idea to end chapters with a mini cliffhanger to keep the readers hooked so they read the next chapter you have, and that is often paid in some form. So the more chapters people read, the more you get paid, and so it's a question of keeping them coming back. So maybe you're asking yourself which story structure suits your story the best. Well, I think you should research additional story structures that are out there. You can look into story structures and then determine which craft you find the most interesting. And like I said, there's a difference in how these roller coasters work or how they look. You might prefer a slower start and then a very big climax, or you might prefer to start with a hook, with a good hook, with a lot of action, and then go down a bit to establish, oh, this is what the normal life is, and then go on from there. There are many possibilities to kind of like create your own roller coaster, to create your own structure, or take a structure and then mold it to suit your needs. When you've chosen a story structure, you can use that as a guideline, but you don't have to worry if the story doesn't match the structure 100%. There's also a difference in when these different plot points happen in the story. It can happen very quickly or it can happen later on, but there are some certain general rules about this, or not rules but tendencies. So if you wait too long before the inciting incident comes, then the reader or the player might wonder what's going to happen. I want to get the story moving. I want to have something happen in here. You can also just write your story and then look at story structures afterward, and then you can try and adjust your story to a mold or one of these structures, or maybe you can just write and not care about story structure at all. That's totally up to you, but that was my take on this. I hope that you've gained something from this video, and if so, I hope you'll like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. Be sure to watch the 2 other videos about Horizon Forbidden West, where I look at the game from a writer's perspective, and the two other videos are about characters and world, or rather world building. This video wraps up the mini-series, but I hope you will stick around on my channel and watch more of my videos. Next week I will get back to doing regular writing vlogs, and I hope you'll watch that and other of my vlogs as well. Thank you for being here, and thank you for watching.